Right now, in a bustling market somewhere in Sri Lanka, there's a sapphire sitting under a high-intensity halogen bulb. And I mean, it looks absolutely perfect. It has this rich, deep blue color. There's, official-looking paperwork sitting right next to it, and a dealer is quoting a price that just seems like the bargain of a lifetime. But if you take that exact same stone, walk maybe 20 feet out the door, and look at it under natural sunlight, that rich blue might just vanish. It
Yeah.
might suddenly look completely dull, lifeless, almost like a piece of dead glass. So, welcome to the global gem trade.
Yeah, that halogen trick is it's one of the oldest in the book. It really preys on that assumption we all have that seeing is believing. I mean, we have this romanticized idea that if we travel straight to the source, bypass the Western jewelry stores and buy a stone right where it was pulled from the earth, that we're somehow guaranteed authenticity.
Right, a wholesale price too.
Exactly. But the reality is that the international gem market is a highly, highly curated environment. What you see as a visitor is carefully designed for you to see.
So how do you navigate a world where your own eyes can be tricked by a light bulb? That is our mission for you today. We are taking you behind the curtain of the global gem trade to figure out how this market actually operates, specifically focusing on the vibrant and honestly sometimes treacherous markets of Sri Lanka.
It's a fascinating landscape, really.
It is, and today we are pulling entirely from the field notes, the 2026 buyer updates, and the independent guides of Kim Rex. She operates in the industry under the name the Gemstone Detective.
And her 2026 updates are particularly crucial right now. The rules of engagement in East Asia and East Africa, they're shifting rapidly. Buying a gem abroad is, well, it's not a standard retail transaction. It is an intricate, relationship-driven ecosystem.
Yeah.
If you walk in assuming the normal rules of commerce apply, you are going to leave with a very expensive piece of dead glass.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really understand the psychology of this market, we kind of have to start the physical origin of the stones. We have to start in the dirt. So the notes take us to the Meetiyagoda Moonstone mines in Sri Lanka.
Right, the Moonstone mines.
Yeah, and if you're a tourist pulling up to this area, it looks highly organized. You see these neatly labeled roadside sites. There's a wooden sign for mine number 1. Down the road is mine number 3. Over there is mine number 5.
It's very picturesque.
Exactly. You're given a tour of a demonstration shaft. You watch a lapidary worker polishing a stone on a wheel, and then you're brought to a showroom. It really presents the illusion of a massive, continuous industrial operation right beneath your feet.
It does. It creates a very clean, understandable narrative for a consumer. But what's fascinating here is that those numbered roadside sites are primarily heritage spaces. They serve a vital purpose, in educating visitors and preserving the historical geography of the region. These are places where different local families opened shafts decades ago.
Right.
But they do not represent the gritty reality of where the active, high-value extraction is happening today.
Which kind of blew my mind. The actual mining is happening miles away, completely hidden from the tourist trail. And the conditions described in these field notes, I mean, they are staggering. When I picture a commercial mine, I'm picturing reinforced steel beams, concrete tunnels, massive ventilation systems, heavy machinery.
Yeah, that's the Western industrial image.
Right. But the reality of Sri Lankan gem mining is deeply traditional and, frankly, incredibly hazardous shaft mining. It's kind of like visiting a theme park's Wild West town versus actually living on the frontier. You're seeing the safe version.
That's a perfect way to put it. Yes, the primary support structures for these active underground shafts are made of local coconut wood. And coconut wood in a damp subterranean environment rots completely in about 18 months.
Wait, if the wood rots that fast, why on earth wouldn't they use steel or concrete? That seems like a massive safety risk for no reason.
I know, it sounds counterintuitive. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of geology, it makes complete economic sense. Gemstones in this region are not found in massive, predictable veins like coal. They are found in what's called the Ilam. The Ilam is essentially an ancient, buried riverbed. Millions of years ago, heavy minerals washed down from the mountains and settled in very specific, highly localized pockets in the gravel.
So it's not just a solid wall of gems?
Not at all. A mining crew might dig a shaft anywhere from 18 to 60 feet deep just to hit that gravel layer. Once they extract that specific pocket of Ilam, the area is exhausted. There is absolutely no reason to invest in permanent steel or concrete infrastructure for a localized gravel pocket that will be emptied in 6 months.
Oh, wow. So the entire operation is inherently temporary. I mean, imagine standing over this. You have miners down in a dark 60-foot hole supported by decaying wood, digging through heavy mud. They might go months before they find a single piece of rough corundum or moonstone.
Exactly. It's grueling work.
When you're sitting in an air-conditioned hotel lobby in Colombo, haggling over $100, it is very easy to forget the physical reality of how that stone surfaced.
It really is. And understanding that physical reality fundamentally changes how you perceive a gemstone's price. You aren't just paying for a shiny mineral. The cost absorbs the immense physical labor, the geological scarcity of the Ilum, the months of extracting worthless mud, and the sheer hazard of trusting your life to temporary coconut wood shafts.
But getting the rock out of the mud is only the first hurdle, right? A rough stone from the Ilum is basically just a cloudy pebble.
Right.
It only holds the potential for value. And the field notes in the Meetiyagoda Moonstones highlight just how easily that potential can be ruined.
Meetiyagoda is globally renowned for producing moonstones with a very specific optical effect called adularescence.
Adularescence.
Yes. When you see a high-quality Sri Lankan moonstone, it has an ethereal, floating blue light that seems to hover just under the surface of the gem, moving as you turn it.
It looks like a drop of glowing water. But what actually causes that blue glow? I mean, it's not dyed, right?
No, it's completely natural. It comes down to the crystal's microscopic structure. As the gem cooled in the earth over millions of years, two different types of the mineral feldspar separated into alternating microscopic layers.
Okay, so it's layered inside.
Exactly. When light enters the stone, it hits these alternating layers, which act almost like a diffraction grating. The light scatters internally, and the physics of that scattering specifically reflects blue light back to your eye. But, and this is the crucial part, that structural layering is highly directional.
Meaning the cutter has to align the stone perfectly with those microscopic layers to capture the light.
Precisely.
So if the lapidary worker on the wheel makes an error, even by like a fraction of a millimeter in the orientation, what happens?
The adularescence simply doesn't appear. The blue light is lost entirely.
You're kidding.
Nope. Millions of years of geological pressure created the optical potential, and a human hand destroyed it in seconds. The cutter has to interpret the rough stone, find the invisible axis of those feldspar layers, and shape the dome of the moonstone to perfectly trap that floating light.
Which introduces a massive psychological element to how gems are valued. We're transitioning from the dirt in physics to human perception now. The notes talk about how high-end insiders evaluate this finished product. They don't just look for an absence of flaws, they look for something called quiet authority.
Yes, quiet authority is the dividing line between an amateur buyer and a seasoned insider. Tourists tend to obsess over the paperwork. They want a lab report, they scrutinize minor clarity grades on a printed chart, and they treat buying a gemstone like solving a math equation where the right numbers equal the best stone.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because we live in a data-driven world. If I have a piece of paper from a top-tier Swiss laboratory telling me a sapphire is chemically and physically flawless, why on earth would I trust my bare eyes over a microscopic analysis? Are you saying a technically perfect stone can still feel ordinary?
I am, yeah. Think of a laboratory report, like a car's specification sheet. The spec sheet will tell you the exact engine displacement, the weight of the chassis, and the chemical composition of the tires. It tells you exactly what the car is.
Okay.
But quiet authority is how the car actually feels when you take a tight corner at 60 miles an hour. You cannot put that on a spreadsheet.
So the lab report is verifying the identity of the stone, not the beauty.
Precisely. A lab report measures the physical properties. It confirms the refractive index and maps the inclusions. It does not measure how the stone interacts with ambient light, how the color saturation holds up when you move from a halogen bulb to natural sunlight, or the emotional impact it has when it catches your eye across a room.
Right, that immediate reaction.
Exactly. Seasoned buyers look for presence. They look for a stone that announces its rarity the second you look at it. The paperwork is secondary. It verifies the investment, but it does not define the exceptionalism of the gem.
That requires a huge paradigm shift for a buyer. You have to learn to trust your eyes, your instincts, and your understanding of light, rather than just pointing to a certificate. But if human perception is so subjective and lighting can drastically alter how a stone looks, how do you actually survive the marketplace?
It's difficult.
Because if you're relying on your eyes, you're incredibly vulnerable to manipulation by the seller.
This raises an important question about where you are actually doing the buying. Sri Lanka has several different arenas for the gem trade, and each environment is engineered to serve a different type of transaction.
The contrast described in the sources is wild. On one hand, you have the open gem markets, like the famous one in Ratnapura. It is absolute sensory overload. It's loud, the streets are crowded, people are shouting, and dealers are thrusting dozens of paper parcels full of stones at you.
And the lighting is intense.
Yeah, they're holding these gems under blindingly bright artificial lights. On the other end of the spectrum, you have private dealer offices in the capital, Colombo. You sit in a quiet, air-conditioned room, sipping tea, looking at one or two stones in controlled natural light.
And if you don't understand the rules of the specific arena you are standing in, you will make a costly mistake. The open markets in Ratnapura are incredibly dynamic, but they are a minefield for the uninitiated. A common pitfall is the assumption of fixed retail pricing. A foreign buyer will walk into the market, ask the price of a sapphire, and assume the quoted number is a firm valuation based on the stone's intrinsic worth.
So what does this all mean for you? It sounds like buying a sapphire in Sri Lanka is less like scanning a barcode at the supermarket and more like negotiating a high-stakes real estate deal. That first price is just an opening gambit.
It is entirely an opening gambit. In the Sri Lankan gem trade, negotiation is not an insult. It is the fundamental mechanism of commerce. The dealer is quoting a price based on their rapid assessment of you. Do you understand the lighting trick? Do you know the difference between a natural inclusion and a synthetic fracture? Have you asked about thermal enhancement?
Let's actually dig into thermal enhancement, because heat treatment comes up constantly in these buyer updates. The sources emphasize that heat treatment is incredibly common. But how does putting a rock in an oven actually change its value so drastically?
It comes down to internal clarity. Many rough sapphires pulled from the Ilam are cloudy. They are filled with microscopic, needle-like inclusions made of titanium dioxide, which the industry calls rutile silk.
Rutile silk.
Okay, and this silk scatters the light, making the stone look milky or dull. But if you take that sapphire and heat it to near-melting temperatures, often over 1,500 degrees Celsius, something remarkable happens.
Wait, the rutile silk melts.
It dissolves. The intense heat causes the titanium dioxide needles to dissolve directly into the crystal lattice of the sapphire.
That is wild.
It really is. When the stone cools, the milkiness is gone. The stone is suddenly highly transparent, and the titanium outerly interacts with the iron in the stone to intensify that deep, desirable blue color.
That is essentially alchemy. You are taking a cloudy, mid-grade rock and artificially forcing it to become a brilliant, high-clarity gem.
And this is exactly why understanding the market is so crucial. A heat-treated sapphire is perfectly stable and beautiful, and it is a standard industry practice. However, a sapphire that emerged from the earth naturally possessing that exact same deep blue color and high clarity without ever needing human intervention is extraordinarily rare.
So it's worth way more.
An untreated natural stone commands a massive financial premium.
So let's picture a novice buyer standing in Ratnapura. A dealer shows them two blue sapphires that look absolutely identical to the naked eye. One is unheated and costs $10,000. The other is heat-treated and costs $2,000. The buyer doesn't know to ask about rutile silk or heat disclosure, so they buy the $2,000 stone, thinking they just successfully haggled a $10,000 gem down to $2,000.
Right, they walk away feeling like a master negotiator, entirely unaware that they just paid full retail price for a heated stone.
And when they get back home and have it appraised, they flood the travel forums, claiming they were scammed by a dishonest dealer. But the expert notes are adamant on this point. The Sri Lankan market is not inherently dishonest.
It is not a scam. It is simply a fluid, knowledge-based economy. The local dealers possess an incredibly sophisticated understanding of clarity zoning, color saturation, and treatment histories. To them, pricing a heated stone lower than an unheated stone is standard operating procedure.
Because that's what it's worth.
Exactly. If you ask a direct, informed question about provenance or treatment, a reputable dealer will disclose it. The friction only occurs when a tourist expects a complex, wholesale commodity market to operate like a heavily regulated Western shopping mall.
But because you are dealing with asymmetrical information, where the seller always knows more about the stone's history than you do, you need a modern framework to defend yourself. You can't just wander into Ratnapura with a pocket full of cash anymore. Which naturally leads us to the new 2026 industry updates. The global rules are rapidly evolving to close this knowledge gap.
They are, and this evolution completely reshapes how a foreign buyer should operate. What stands out to you regarding the new protocols?
Well, what stands out is how institutional it's becoming. We are seeing a massive push across South Asia and East Africa to adopt the Responsible Jewelry Council, or RJC, standards. Countries are rolling out stringent, official provenance certificates to track exactly which patch of earth a stone came from. It feels like the Wild West of cash handshakes is finally being forced to establish a paper trail.
That paper trail is an economic necessity now. Over the last decade, lab-grown synthetics have become so sophisticated that even experienced dealers struggle to identify them without advanced equipment. The only way for a natural gem market to maintain its premium pricing is through absolute, verifiable provenance.
So pushing for ethical documented buying isn't just about ensuring the guy digging the 60-foot coconut wood shaft gets a fair wage.
Not at all. What's fascinating here is that ethical buying is often pitched as a moral crusade. But in the 2026 landscape, demanding RJC compliance and provenance documentation is a cutthroat, highly effective strategy to protect your own wallet. It is your ultimate defense against buying an untraceable synthetic or a heavily treated stone passed off as natural.
And you really need that defense, because your usual safety nets do not exist out there. The field notes explicitly warn buyers about the illusion of consumer protection. Take the Section 75 rule in the UK.
Oh, this is a big one.
Yeah, if you buy a faulty refrigerator on your credit card back home, the credit card company is jointly liable. You file a claim, you get your money back. People assume that Magic Shield travels with them. It doesn't. If you execute a foreign transaction, especially in the secondary cash markets off the tourist trail, your domestic credit card protections often evaporate.
Once the money changes hands in those environments, the transaction is final. You are entirely reliant on your own due diligence before the sale. Sellers who refuse to provide provenance info should be accused to simply walk away.
So what does that due diligence actually look like? Together, we can run through the expert's checklist for you. If you are sitting at a private viewing room in Colombo, your first move is demanding the paper trail. You ask for origin documentation, treatment history, and independent lab certificates.
And you watch how the dealer reacts. If they brush off the request or tell you that certificates are only for amateurs who don't trust their eyes, you walk away. The concept of quiet authority applies to the visual beauty of the stone, not the verification of its structural integrity. If they will not stand behind the stone's history on paper, you do not finalize the deal.
Right. Once they provide the documents, you create your own physical record.
Yeah.
You photograph the stone under different lighting conditions, you photograph the certificates, you document the receipts, and keep a written log of the seller's verbal claims regarding heat treatment.
It is also vital to verify the seller's local reputation. In a relationship-driven market, a dealer standing within their own community is their most valuable asset. This is where utilizing an independent local guide or an established industry contact becomes invaluable. They know which dealers operate with RJC compliance and which ones rely on tourists who don't ask questions.
Next, you have to separate yourself from the emotional rush of the environment. The sensory overload of the market is designed to create urgency. Never buy the first stone you see, no matter how good the halogen lighting makes it look. Compare prices across multiple dealers to establish a baseline for the current market rate.
Finally, you must engage with the cultural mechanics of the negotiation. Politeness, respect, and demonstrating a basic knowledge of the stone's properties build immediate trust. A dealer is far more likely to offer a fair price to someone who respects the complexity of their trade than to a tourist who aggressively accuses them of trying to pull a scam.
So wrapping this all up, what does this mean for you? We have traveled from the decaying coconut wood shafts buried 60 feet in the Sri Lankan mud to the lapidary wheels, where a fraction of a millimeter dictates a stone's optical survival, all the way to the intense, halogen-lit negotiations of the Ratnapura markets.
The overriding lesson is that a gemstone's value is not determined by location alone. It is a highly variable calculation based on geological scarcity, immense human labor, and your own ability to navigate the asymmetrical information of the trade. If you rely solely on curated tourist sites and assumptions of fixed retail pricing, you will be taken advantage of.
But if you look past the curated tourist sites, train your eye to recognize the quiet authority of an untreated stone, understand the chemistry behind thermal enhancements, and rigorously apply the 2026 RJC ethical guidelines, you flip the script. You transition from a vulnerable tourist into an informed insider. You're no longer just buying a rock. You are safely and confidently navigating a centuries-old ecosystem. A gemstone is never just a finished object. It is a physical record of extraction conditions, local history, and trust networks.
Think about a piece of jewelry you own right now, or perhaps a sapphire you are dreaming of buying in the future. We view these stones as static objects of beauty. But if that stone could speak, what invisible networks of local families, 60-foot coconut wood shafts, and centuries-old trade routes would it reveal? Would it tell a story of microscopic rutile silk dissolved in a 1500-degree furnace? Or the story of a tense, unspoken negotiation in a crowded market? What hidden history are you wearing right now?